Good morning, good afternoon. Whatever the case may be, you're watching Access to Justice, and I'm attorney Delia Parker Mims. Once a year on Access to Justice, we take a look at the state of affairs in our segment entitled, What's Going On? From that 1970 song Marvin Gaye, What's Going On, where he talked about all the turmoil. So we look at that in 2019 and see if we've ever figured out what's going on, and we're going to do that today. Today I am speaking with attorney, local activist, Prudence Sanchez, and she also doubles as one of my very best friends. Now, it is my pleasure to have you on the show today so we can just talk about what's going on, what's really going on.
Okay.
Some of your activism, we're going to talk about the elections, some gerrymandering, and we're going to talk about the detention centers and kind of what our feelings are of what's happening. To me, the word apathy is what's coming out, but who knows, there may be different things. But let's start with you, Prudence.
Okay.
Tell us about your activism and how you got started doing that, and you are also a local attorney, is that correct?
That's correct. Well, I started my activism, I believe, as a young person, but I really don't consider myself an activist. I just believe that, you know, doing the right thing is always what you should be striving to do. I was born and raised in Louisiana. I'm a person of color, always a child of color, and so those things of what have led me to become the person that I am. We also grew up, we didn't have our own home, so I kind of know what it feels like to not be secure in your home environment. So those are just some of the things that I can empathize with other people that lead me to act.
Well, you say you don't like the term activism, and most activists don't, because it's a part of who they are.
Right.
They don't feel like they're stretching themselves. But you are involved in many different things. You give a lot of your time, you give a lot of your talent, and your husband as well is involved, right?
Yes, that's correct.
We had Alfredo Sanchez on the show before. He was working towards preventing certain bills being passed so that, in his view, the burden would not pass to the younger generation. But that's something you and your husband have been working on a lot of in the community, is that correct?
That's correct. We do feel for the generations that are coming after us. We don't feel that they are going to be in as good a position as even we are or were. We believe it's already hard for the young families to make it, and so even if we would benefit from some of the policies that or laws that are passed, we feel an obligation to the younger people to because they are our future, and so we feel more of an obligation to them versus ourselves.
So feeling that obligation, again, is what causes you to act, even though you don't carry the title activism. So what are some of the organizations you're involved with?
I am on the board right now of Serve Denton. I take a very limited role in that position. I have also been on the board of Denton Affordable Housing Corporation. I recently retired from that, or resigned from that position. I am the treasurer of LULAC, which is the League of United Latin American Citizens. I have been a member of the NAACP. I have been on the Homeless Coalition. That was several years ago, and so.
And you are always actively involved when it's voting time.
Yes, yes. I am a current voter registrar. I have been in the past. My husband is as well. So we just feel that it's important to educate the public on the importance of voting, registering to vote, and getting out there and voting. And
during the last election, though, you were also a voter deputy or a voter clerk. What did you do during the election? Yes,
I was a voter. I was a clerk, and so we just processed voters as they came in to vote.
And those are all volunteer things, is that correct?
Yes, they are volunteer. You spend about 4 hours training on the machines and how to do those properly, and I enjoyed it. I had a really nice time.
So on the day of election, which usually has many of people wrapped around the building coming inside. Mm-hmm. You were actually on the inside, and you were one of the people that was taking the election ballots.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And who did you have with you doing that?
I had my granddaughter. Well, I think she was 16, going on 17 at that time, and she had the best time, and she thought it was fun. Even when she went back to school and told her peers about it, they want to get in on it the next time.
You think it's important to do that, to instill in our next generations the idea that they need to make the world a better place for people themselves and the people behind them?
I really do. I do feel for the next generation. The kids that are graduating from high school right now, I believe that some of the hope that we had, I think that they are lacking that, and you know, it's pretty difficult to know the burdens that we have placed on them.
Right. Well, let's talk about some of the things that are happening today, and that's all we're going to do is talk about it with Prudence Sanchez, a activist who doesn't really like the title. But when you mention all the boards that you're on, you don't just sit on those boards. I happen to know that you are one of those people who are actually out there doing stuff. Now, the word that comes to my mind is apathy when we talk about a lot of things that are happening. Would you agree with that? I do agree with that, because many times when we are manned at voter registration tables, you know, people will come by and we'll like, hey, have you registered to vote? And they say, my vote doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter. And so that really shows that really it's a hope problem. And if there was some way that we could get the public's hopes up, you know, that something good can happen from what they do, then I think we could make big inroads in voter registration and voter participation. Well, it's no doubt that you do a little work with the Democratic Party.
Yes.
So in 2016, there was a lot of hope going on.
Yes.
On that election. How do you think the results of that affected, say, millennials or people younger than that, with whether or not their vote actually counts?
Well, the millennials, I believe, do understand that they do have a need to get out and vote, because when I did man the voting polls, there were a lot of people excited, young people excited to come and vote, and so I was really happy to see that. So I think that
maybe they were happy to do. Now, after the results came out, we saw a lot of people resisting, feeling hopeless.
Right.
Do you think that continued on in terms of their view on whether or not their vote matters?
Yes, I think it really woke up a lot of people to realize that your vote does matter. However, I mean, there is that argument about the Electoral College that doesn't really represent the popular vote, and you know, there's been a lot of commentary and a lot of debate in the public, you know, squares and just among people. You know, should we do anything about that? I don't know the answer to that, but it, you know, I think it does contribute to the apathy.
Well, that is kind of the electoral issue is an issue neither one of us are specials on.
No.
We're both attorneys, but in briefly understanding that when it was created in order to balance out each state's share, so that one person wasn't always going to be elected from a certain region.
Right.
So I guess today the question is, do we still need that? Or do we need to go to a popular vote thing? Things that we certainly can't answer in this segment, but those are the kinds of things that are coming up. So in terms of elections, we're going to talk about that. The 2016 election, of course, it brought out a lot of people who felt like their vote didn't count, and it brought to light more of the electoral process. But then we had the 2018 midterms, and something in those midterms happened. I read some articles about what was going on in 2018 that got people excited. And it was that an article in Police magazine, suburban women are fed up and could drive a blue wave. Would you say that describes you at all, or have you seen that type of energy coming out of suburban America?
I have seen that energy come out. I think it's kind of unpredictable because I think it's unpredictable. We can't really say what suburban women are going to do because we're all diverse. We're all we have our own concerns, and so. But I really believe that if the suburban women are really fed up and they want to do something about it, I believe it can be done for sure.
Well, when we saw the results of the 2018 midterms, we saw a lot of states in their House district races flipping blue.
Yes.
And of course, we know recently with the remarks from our president that we've had quite a few women and people of color that were able to go to U.S. Congress. Do you think that had anything to do with any of the motivation behind the suburban women?
As far as getting them, as far as that they becoming
in that
elected.
2018 midterm election.
Yes, I do. I believe that people, women of color, and just, you know, it's probably not just women of color. It's just people in general who see the issues and want a diverse representation. Not necessarily one color or the other, but just people who really want our country and our communities to be the best we can be, and, you know, stop playing this football game of us and them.
Right. So when we go back to the issue of apathy and voting, it has been said that America's turnout in recent memory is trailing behind others in developed countries in terms of voter turnout. So in other countries that follow basically the same model, we have pretty much one of the lowest turnouts.
Yes.
Some of those reasons why they have, and can you bring up the first slide, would be registration process. In some states, registering is automatic. Do you think maybe we should consider doing something like that?
Well, I think all options are on the table. I don't think that any option should not be considered. You know, I don't know what problems any state is having with their automatic voting, but I do think that as many barriers that we can reasonably remove would be very, very beneficial to our communities and our country as a whole.
Another data showed that education shows that the single biggest predictor of whether someone will vote is whether or not they hold a college degree. And that kind of goes along the line with the article in Politics magazine, indicating that the educated suburban women are fed up. Have you seen any of that in your activism in terms of people voting, having access to education being an indicator or factor in motivating them to want to go to the polls?
Honestly, no, I haven't, because I know that there are lots of people who aren't educated, you know, in our public, I can't think of the word, you know, formal education, who do stay involved in their communities and do care about, you know, what's going on.
Yeah, and I can remember my grandmother, who did not have a formal education, voting was always a big and important thing.
Right.
And some people even insisted upon waiting on election day, not really taking advantage of early voting, but they wanted to get all dressed up and go make sure they cast their vote.
Yeah, that's true. Recently, I mean, I've had a conversation with my mother that in her state, there's not a lot of advertising about when things are being voted on or what's being voted on or who's running and those sorts of things. So those are also barriers that need to be addressed, where you know, that people can know what's going on.
In terms of, well, that goes back to the second point in terms of education, not just having a formal degree, but having the access to information as to what the issues are,
yes,
and why it's important to them. I think that might be what I'm hearing you say,
right,
sort of along that line.
Absolutely. And honestly, here in town, I wish that we had a big banner that said it's election time that goes across Locust Street like we do for Arts and Jazz and for Rosebud Festival. You know, we really, I think, need a big banner like that to remind people.
Why not celebrate it and embrace voting as much as we do all the other things we do in the community? Now, have you heard of some of the election centers that some of the other cities are doing?
Yes.
Where they're allowing you to vote at any precinct on election day, not just in early voting?
Yes, I don't see anything wrong with that. I don't know what the bases are for having to go to your precinct and vote on your day. I don't know the laws on that and the rules on that, but it does seem like that might be a little outdated.
Did you see a lot of people being turned away on election day because they were at the wrong precinct?
Yes. Yes. But you know, you're not just turned away, you are actually given, hey, this is where you need to vote, and this is how to get there. Yeah.
It'll be interesting if there was any type of way, and I know there isn't, to capture the data on how many people are willing to leave the place that they went to vote when they stood in line all that time, got up to the vote, and then told that they were at the wrong precinct, only to be turned away.
Right, and you never, you know, as far as I understand, you know, you don't turn them away. You say, well, you know, there's the provisional voting. You know, there's different things to do to try to remedy that. So
right.
people
now,
do get to vote.
Now, the provisional voting, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that your vote's going to be counted, though. Is that correct?
You're right.
What they just did in Tarrant County, they recently, their county commissioners sought to have more election centers so that people can go and vote at different areas. And I think that'd be something that we really need to consider in Denton. I know that they had brought that up once before, and it's something that they probably might want to consider moving forward. Let's go on to a different issue when we talk about apathy and whether or not people are interested in what's happening. Have you been keeping track of any of the comments that have been coming out of Washington?
Yes, I have.
How about the most recent comments that came from our president regarding the 4 women congresspeople who he used the term they should go back to where they came from?
Right. I don't know what he meant by that because basically I believe that they're all from the United States, so I don't know what he meant.
It's kind of have you ever heard that term before?
Yes, I have. Mm-hmm.
All right. It's kind of an outdated way of saying you don't belong. That's how I look at it. And as we are moving forward on the issue of apathy, let's talk about the detention centers.
Okay.
Currently, our policy now is that when people are coming to ask for asylum, which is what they are legally required to do, ask for asylum, they have to be on the U.S. soil. They can't ask for asylum at an embassy in another country. They have to be on soil to ask for asylum. Our policy is to split those families up and to put them. How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't agree with the way that the people are being treated on the border. I have not gone down there personally, but I know people who have, and it's just really not what you would expect to see our country doing.
Yeah.
In
a way,
you
would think people would be more upset regarding the values that America is supposed to stand by.
Yes.
Than to allow, certainly with the children, at least that's how I see it.
Right.
We would want to talk about land of the free, home of the brave. Why are we afraid of people who are seeking help, whether or not they qualify for asylum?
Right.
Or not.
Right.
In my opinion, we don't know. They may not qualify. That does not mean they're going to receive it. But how we treat them, what does that say?
Well, I still think there's that mentality of us and them, that the pie is not big enough for everybody. You can't have a piece of my pie, and so whatever happens to you, it's your own fault because you shouldn't have done X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, we have gotten to a point where we seemed like we were a little bit more hardened, and hopefully there could be a bigger push so that it's kind of like during the Olympics. During the Olympics, we're all American, and we all want to see America do well, no matter who the person is handing the baton off to.
Right.
They hand it off, and we want them to take it and move and go to the finish line. How can we get back to that state of mind when we think about each other and what's happening? Right.
Well, I don't think that it's going to change until it really hits home to people personally. I mean, I don't know how that's going to change when when people in our country, are struggling day to day, trying to make ends meet, having to work 2 or 3 jobs just to have a roof over their heads. They're really struggling to keep their head above water, and it's really hard to think beyond that when your basic needs aren't met. It's really hard, but I think that we really need to wake up, because I believe that as a country we take our democracy for granted. We don't think that it could be taken away, or that another type of government could replace our democracy if we're not careful and if we don't watch it.
Right, and that goes back to the issue of people need to understand the power and the importance of voting.
Yes, yes. I mean, yes, we need to participate in our government. We need to try to make a better future for our kids. We really need to get their hopes up.
Now, when people decide not to vote, another thing that I've been hearing is the issue of the two-party system. Have you heard that?
Yes.
What is that?
Well, the issue of the two-party system, I believe the founding fathers, and I'm not going to say which one because at this moment I can't remember, did not think that that was going to be good for the democracy because, you know, a house divided cannot stand. And so I really wish that we had people who were really concerned about the country and not just, I'm Republican, so therefore I can't follow any Democrat. I'm Democrat. I can't vote, for Republican. We have to choose out of that system that we participate in, and we participate with the one that more closely resonates with us. It doesn't mean that we agree with everything that a person does, or so it does kind of lock us into that because that's just what we have. And I wish that someone really cared about the country, and once would get into government would keep that focus rather than saying, how can I maintain my position of power? Right,
and by someone you mean each individual voter, instead of being more loyal to party, I think is what you're saying. Look at each individual candidate, because not every candidate is going to support the platform of the left or the platform of the right, support every single position.
Right.
But that platform may more closely resemble their philosophy. But as a candidate and an individual, they bring to it many different attributes that people should, we should kind of break out of it. But lately I've been hearing a lot of people who don't really care for either side, and are using that as an excuse not to vote.
Right. And they don't realize that, and that's another thing that some potential voters would say, I don't want to be involved in politics. Well, when you don't vote, you are voting. When you don't vote, you are impacting what happens. You're not out of it. You're not an island. You're, by not participating, you do push it one way or the other.
Right. By not participating, just because you're not letting your voice be heard, you're simply allowing someone else's voice, their concern, their priorities to become yours.
Yeah. That's true. And I just think that if we had someone that cared about the country and the communities, that we could really get a lot done.
You think that would inspire more people to look at them more as a candidate?
I think so.
Yeah. One of the most lowest voter turnouts would be our municipal elections, and they have quite an impact on you. Our municipals, our school boards, at times they will have even less than 1% of the population making those decisions. Can you imagine that?
I know that for a fact. I mean, I know it for a fact. And you hear the saying that all politics is local. Well, it's true, and I know that some people wait, well, I'm just going to vote in the presidential election. But you live in your community. Your kids go to your school, to the schools in your community. It matters. I mean, when somebody wins and there was only 500 votes, I mean, that's mind-blowing.
That is mind-blowing and fairly outrageous. And a lot of our mayor positions are just won on a couple of hundred votes.
Right.
Out of a town of more than 100,000 people. That speaks to the issue of apathy. But just as you were saying, our life is run by the local government.
Yes.
Our local taxes, our county taxes, our city, our school taxes. When we get those property values that come to our houses and everybody's protesting, when we have those streets that don't get repaired, the repairs that go in your schools, that comes out of local government. And not participating in the local government and opting to only participate in the presidential election makes no sense. We do need more information about that. Like you said, maybe a banner like we do when we have our other city fairs.
Yes.
It's election time.
It's election time. It's, early voting now, regular voting here, so, or at this time. So I think that, I wish that more people ran for office. I think people believe you have to be the smartest person, that you have to have money, and it does take money, sometimes to win these elections, which is disappointing, but you know, just some grassroots campaigning can really
Yeah.
go a long way, and I really wish that more people, you know, they're like, well, I'm not qualified. If you are 18 and or whatever it is for that office, and you're an American citizen or whatever the qualifications are, you're qualified. You don't have to have a PhD or even a bachelor's degree.
That's true.
Or you don't.
And some of our elected officials actually don't. So you simply have to meet the age requirements, the citizen requirements, in terms of are you a citizen of that community long enough, and some requirements may be you have to be 18, some others may be you have to be 25.
Right.
So
And
once you meet those,
absolutely.
put your name on the ballot.
Yeah, and going back to the voting issue, I mean, some people think that just because they've had that they have a criminal background, that doesn't mean that you cannot vote. People who, you know, think I can't vote really should look at what the rules are, because you probably can.
Well, right now our state attorney general is under indictment, so you can navigate the process and still have to deal with some of those personal issues. But you mentioned earlier about grassroots campaigning. That's kind of what happened with the Beto effect. Wouldn't you agree? He didn't win, certainly in Denton County, but we were able to see that a couple of seats flipped.
Yes.
Which comes from more of the grassroots campaigning, more so than from the top. It was more from the bottom.
Right.
So it does work. So we are getting down to the final minutes of our show, and I appreciate you coming today.
Well, it's my pleasure.
And just having a talk like we normally do, sharing our own opinion, which, you know, is what all that's worth.
Yeah,
is
we
our
have
opinion.
a good time. Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to give you what we call an opportunity to do a closing statement about, you know, whatever you want, some of the things we've been talking about, and then I will close it out with what I call my final argument.
Okay.
So.
Well, my closing argument is that we really need to support our children. We need to support them because they are our future. We need to try to leave the world a little better than what we found it for them. This is a heavy burden that we are placing on them, the mistakes that we've made, the things that we've done. And, you know, we're not giving them enough money to get educated. We're not educating them to be competitors in the market. You know, when you hear of from people in the higher positions who, well, let me just say, I congratulate UT for what they've done lately to make education accessible to a larger number of children who are brilliant. I mean, just being on the treasurer of LULAC and on the scholarship committee, some of these children are brilliant.
And
but
just need the opportunity,
they need
right?
the opportunity, just like it said in the paper, you know, people who don't have hope, once they have hope, then they have something to strive for.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to do what we call our final argument. Democracies work best when everybody has a seat at the table, and it's important that you go and you exercise your right to vote. Vice President Hubert Humphrey, I think he said it best about how government should operate. He said the moral test of government is how it treats its citizens in the dawn of life, how it treats its citizens in the twilight of life, and how it treats its citizens in the shadows of life. And in America, we have the right to vote and pick our representatives to ensure that our government is passing that moral test of government. So for Access to Justice, my name is Delia Parker Mims, and I've had Prudence Sanchez, and we thank you for watching with us. And remember, exercise your right to vote. Thank you.